Hey guys, final week. Make the making the push for the end of the session. Yeah, cool. Um, Idiocracy. You guys are adorable, by the way. Um, Reading through your comments, it I guess it gives me hope that your the younger generations are still so optimistic, but I really don't think you're wrapping your head around how long 500 years is. Like that's the key to this movie and its plausibility and obviously making the connections between our culture now and sort of drawing those things out, making us think about those things is the 500 years. If it was 50 years, yeah, you could say, oh, it's way over exaggerated. But 500 years, I know we can't wrap our heads around that. But think about what life on this planet was like 500 years ago, right? And how everything has progressed. Like, haven't we peaked? Aren't we on a down, at least in this country, aren't we on a down swing? And if you project that out 500 years, the 500, that's a lot. Like, think about just 200 years ago in here, in this country, 200 years ago. What was it like? It was basically just a horse based society. Like, everybody had a horse. Now, who has a horse? Nobody has. Rich people have horses, I guess, and farmers, maybe. But we don't use horses, right? That's just a tiny thing. 200 years ago, 500 years is so long. So, and and I've seen since this movie came out, since you've been alive, right? This movie came out in 2006, but we can go since you've been alive. Most of you probably were born around 2000. Like, in that time, in 20 years, we have seen all of this stuff progress in the wrong direction. No, 20 years. If we continue on this trajectory, in 500 years, it will 100% be worse than what Idiocracy posits. So, like I said, you guys are adorable. I love the positivity. I love the go get 'em mentality. Um, Hopefully that will prevail. Hopefully, um, but we can only speculate, obviously. Um, so let's talk. I'll talk about the movie itself. Like, it's it's a call to arms, basically, for Americans to be like, just to self-evaluate and reevaluate the way we live, I think. And it's 100% Mike Judge. If you don't know Mike Judge, Beavis and Butthead, he did, and King of the Hill. Those are his two big things. Um, and this is his, right? This is his comedy uh, is born or begins where shit's most fucked up. This is just an amalgam of all the things, these problematic things that he's seeing, and he's really uh, implementing these two um, two of the credos of this course, right? Identifying shit that's most fucked up and using comedy to expose it or bring awareness to it or whatever, and exaggeration to the point of realization. Like, this is like, most of you are like, okay, this is a little much. Is it though? Anyway, yeah, that's the point. Like, he does wildly exaggerate things. Those are the things we're supposed to be thinking about or be realizing about the world we live in and our position, you know, adjacent to those things. Um, so the answer to is idiocracy plausible is yes. Uh, it was um, it was cute. Like, I've been teaching this movie since it came out in 2006. So in those classes, I'd offer up the question. It was kind of, we had the luxury of sort of laughing and joking about it, and it was cute to say, "Oh yeah, this could happen. It's plausible." That's what's so frightening, and that's why I envy you guys for being just sort of so optimistic about it. Because, like I was saying before, even since then, we've gone so drastically towards the idiocracy. Even in that 20 years, 15 years, whatever it is, 15 years, we've gone so rapidly towards it. And many of the things have come true or we're in the midst of. So it took on when Trump was elected, obviously, and I know this looks kind of like a MAGA hat, but when when Trump was elected, it got real quick because everybody started making these connections. And like, oh shit, Idiocracy warned us about this. 15, that was 10 years. There's 10 years between Idiocracy and Trump presidency. Like, if that doesn't scare you when you project it out 500 years, you you feel me. And I actually, so I used to use that as a paper topic. Just, is idiocracy plausible? And after Trump got elected and shit got a little hairy, I tweeted something like, to all those of you who answered no to this question, I'm going back and failing you. um, wrote their papers saying no, it's not plausible. Um, so that's what I want you guys to try to wrap your head around. Like, most of you were like, yeah, it's plausible now. But 10 years ago, or 10 years before, 15 years ago, people were arguing that it is not plausible. You see what I'm saying? Like, just in that tiny, tiny, infinitesimal speck of time, relatively speaking, we've already had this sea change, and that should speak to it. Its plausibility, at least. So I said, have we not seen in 15 years these things happening, right? Exacerbating all of these problems that we're talking about. It's 500 years. That's a lot. That's a lot. It basically is turning into a documentary. So, I like to use this cute phrase. It's not a credo, don't worry. But, and a comedy shall lead them. that's kind of what this course is all about, like showing how comedy can lead us to truth, change, you know, things like that. And I was kind of surprised none of you mentioned the connection between this movie and Wall-E, the Disney movie about the cute little robot that picks up garbage. I'm assuming you've all seen Wall-E. You're of that age. And I mean, if you look at the opening of Idiocracy and the opening of Wall-E are almost shot by shot remakes, right? The mountains of trash and the entire world is just taken over, and they kind of pan in on this trash avalanche and things like that. But there's so many connections to Wall-E that are, I think, really interesting because it's not just Mike Judge out there, ranting like a lunatic, like, this is coming, this is coming. Wall-E's the same thing. In Wall-E, corporations have overrun the world. They've ruined the planet. It's completely inhabitable, so they fly away. The public is fat, is overweight and distracted and doesn't care and just sort of, just going along with whatever uh, the corporations tell them to do. And yeah, it's such an interesting parallel between those two movies. When did Wall-E come out? That's a great question that I will answer right now. Wall-E 06, 8. I can't read it. 08. So they're of the same time ish. So yeah, like those connections. Wall-E was basically Idiocracy for kids. So yeah, what shit is fucked up in this movie? You might ask. What does Mike Judge see as what's fucked up? I mean, the big ones are anti-intellectualism, right? Um, uh, Corporate capitalist failure, complete collapse of corporate capitalism, corporate culture and capitalism, basically the failure, their takeover of the government, their complete infiltration into our political system. Um, I mean, with lobbyists and special interest, and I mean, all of those things going together, causing this collapse. And people are dumb, numb, right? Greedy, obese, just all like the seven deadly sins. Like we're just like completely sort of compliant to the seven deadly sins, basically. If you, yeah, um, like those seem to be the big targets for him. Um, and again, I'm going to keep going back to this. Is he wrong? Like, have we not seen all of these things happen? Like, there's a huge, the conservative right is incredibly interested in anti-intellectualism. Culturally speaking, we're seeing this trend away from education, and toward anti-intellectualism. And this movie also talks about the way the role technology plays in all of these kinds of things. Brondo is this huge corporation. How far away from Brondo is Amazon at this point in Bezos? How far away? Right? Like, Brando basically buys the government and has control over everything. Everything's privatized. And how that completely the bottom falls out of it. And the people are just sort of, like I said, dumb, numb, greedy, obese. This, yeah, and if you watch the video from Friday, right, they lack empathy, and they it's just kind of right. They lack empathy for their fellow human being. Like these are again cautionary tale. It's like be careful because this stuff will get worse before it gets better. Maybe that's the takeaway. Um, and that what's interesting is I think it makes this comment too how when corporate interest or capitalism or whatever you want to call it infiltrates our politics and our government in such a way, it puts people in power who shouldn't be there, right? It puts shills in power, people to make decisions not for the general public or for the good of the country or progress, but for those special interests. So, I mean, what better example of that is there than Trump, right? Who, I mean, he is all of those things. He is this celebrity, so he has this media connection to media. He's a businessman, so he has this connection to, right, the corporate world, and now he's this politician. He is the complete synthesis of those things. And I was like, what did I say? That he represents the mutual corruption of government, media, and corporations, right? This mutual agreement, which seems to be, I mean, he is, if nothing else, he represents that. It's like, okay, government, what's government's role? We will tell the people what to do, right? We'll get them to do what we want them to do. Media is complicit. Media, you tell them, you be our mouthpiece, you get our message out. You not only get our message out, but you at the same time satiate the public and distract them from all this stuff that's going on behind their backs with the exchange of money and power at to their detriment, right? Give them shows like movies like Ass and shows like Oh My Balls, so that they might forget about what's going on, right? Give them Real Housewives, give them fucking, The Bachelorette, give them all this trash to just sort of distract them. And then corporations will basically move in and pay for, you know, pay off the politicians to continue this cycle of misinformation and things like that. And they'll run away with all the money. So Trump is at the nexus of those three things, right? The mutual corruption of government, media, and corporations. And that's sort of this movie saying that in the long run that won't work, right? Or hopefully it won't work. So I think that's a big takeaway from this movie, and it is prophetic. The whole Brando, right? People's blind allegiance to Brando, right? Those are some of the funniest scenes. Right? But Brando has electrolytes. Like, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, you don't fucking know what that means or what electrolytes are or if they really do help you. Like, It's what Brondo told us. It's what the media told us. It's what the government told us, right? So Brondo is this obviously this exaggerated to the point of realization metaphor, you know, for that sort of privatizing government, basically. Um, and basically, the bad mix. It's a bad mix when you have this corporate greed and a mindless public. Like, that's not going to work. And it seems like we're trending more towards that. Um, it, it's profit over everything, right? It's profit over progress for sure. Um, and I've said this before about idiocracy. Brings up this idea that we're only as smart as we are greedy, right? Like, and that's when a couple of you like Danny, I think, and Tara were like, you know, there's too many people who in business, in medicine, whatever it is, that want to help and are being educated to get this to avoid getting this dumb, right? But think about this. We're only as smart as we are greedy. So I think that's the point of Brondo, right? Brondo has replaced water with this sports drink. Now, the people at Brondo are smart enough to know that that Brondo's not going to grow the crops. This will inevitably lead to this collapse, but that's not profitable. So they're more greedy than they are intelligent. Like greed is one of those things that clouds judgment and intelligence and reason and logic, right? Um, so we're only as smart as we are greedy. I think that's what this movie sort of puts out there. And how greedy, I mean, we're at our greediest, I feel like, right now. Um, so that kind of greed, this level of greed and thirst for power is, you know, can make us dumber, as it were, because all we see is profit and power, regardless of the fallout, right? Or what might be more reasonable. Um, the government has no interest in you understanding it. It's wholly invested in distracting you from it, which I just mentioned before, right? Tons of comedians through the 70s, 80s, 90s talk about this thing of just like, TV and movies and all the shit that's sort of, and it's gotten progressively worse, is there to distract you from what's really going on, right? And the things that you should be concerned about and invested in. And that's happening here. The President Trump connection is too accurate to ignore, right? As sort of harbingers of this kind of change or devolution into an abyss. Um, so I think the the video from Friday makes that connection. Like I'd rather have Camacho. I would too. That idea of malicious stupidity, right? It's like Camacho seems like a good guy. He just wants the best for everybody. He was kind of put into this position, right? And immediately steps back when a better qualified candidate shows up. Uh, that would be awesome. Um, but again, I think power, greed, clout, all that kind of stuff. Um, I like to break down the whole lead, follow, get out of the way mentality that Joe, at the beginning, before when they choose him to be the subject of this experiment, and he's like, yeah, you guys said, you know, the army or whatever, lead, follow, get out of the way. He's like, I got out of the way. They're like, yeah, you're supposed to either lead or follow. And I break that down because I think that's an interesting thing, um, because we shouldn't do any of those three choices. There's another choice that they didn't mention that I think Joe proves the best choice throughout the movie. So I think the person who wants to lead is generally opening themselves up to power over progress, right? Somebody's like, I want to be the leader. I want that's somebody who's that focused on it is easily corruptible. And you say, well, I'll give you this. You want power? I'll give you this. You have to give me like very easy to corrupt that. I mean, that's somebody who really wants to lead, right? Is power over progress. The follower reinforces that kind of power, right? The follower's just like, yeah, just whatever, do it. So that reinforces that type of power, which I think makes the chasm between those in power and those without power even wider. And then getting out of the way sort of lets that cycle continue. The fourth option should be get in the way. And that's what Joe does. Joe gets in the way of these cycles of power perpetuating. And that's what, that's what inevitably changes things. And it's no coincidence that he is literally average, right? Joe, right? He's not sure. That's a metaphor as well. Like, none of this is going to change until the regular people get their shit together and get on board. Like, you can talk all you want about changing the world and climate change and racism and sexism and all these things that just sort of are clinging to us and pulling us down. None of it's going to change until me, you, the guy next door gets on board and tries to, do something about it. And that's for real. So once he goes back in time, forward in time, basically, no one listens to Joe. Like, that's this metaphor too, for like no one listening, like that anti-intellectualism. Like, we're a culture of middle schoolers, basically, right? Everything's dumb or stupid or gay or whatever, even though we don't know what that means for the most part, right? Science, facts, reason, logic, be damned. What else? What did I say? So don't even bother, right? I wrote something else down. It was like that. We're a culture of middle schoolers. Everything's stupid or dumb or gay. We don't know anything but insist we know everything. Right? Is that not? I've had 3 middle schoolers. You're all the same. You were all in middle school. You think you're fucking the shit, and you're not. You think you know everything. You want, yeah, and you just don't. And we dismiss everything as, especially anything different, as like, that's weird, or that's dumb, or that's gay, as that's a favorite of the middle school set. And how is that not what's happening here? That's a metaphor for the way we currently, our culture, much of our culture, not all of it, obviously, treats science, facts, reason, logic. And when that is at the expense of this sort of corporate, you know, capitalistic government takeover, um, we lose. Everybody loses. Um, more oh yeah, this movie is certainly more plausible than other post-apocalyptic movies like I Legend or Day After Tomorrow or something. Like I think you can really sink your teeth into this. It's no longer this cute observation like, oh, we're almost living in an idiocracy. Like it's for real. So like I'd rather a comedy movie like this that's sort of like, hey, this cautionary tale than, you know, I think it's more effective than something like I Legend or whatever. Um, some of you guys mentioned the role of technology in this movie, like the way they address technology, um, and stuff like that, right? How technology urges us to think less these days, and a lot of this stuff I kept going back to Bo Burnham Inside, which is how we started the session. Um, what's that say? It devalues information, right? I can't remember who was talking about this. Might have been Paige. Uh, had a comment that was like, it just devalues information because no one's really learning anything because there's a difference between learning and knowing, right? And we know a lot because we can Google things immediately, right? And we can be like, oh, I know that. But do you really know it if you just looked it up in 3 seconds and then never thought about it again? Like, technology is urging us to think less, right? It demands very little of our brains, and it sort of devalues information and learning, I think, for the most part, like not always. Um, and just sort of like, this is back to what I said during the Onion video. The internet is another thing that we people have ruined, right? The internet is this infinite source of knowledge. You could literally learn anything, but what do we typically reduce it down to, right? Cat videos, porn, and fantasy sports, right? Like that's pretty much it. I'm obviously generalizing, but how many of us are using the internet constructively, right? Um, it's another pure idea that humanity, has sort of, reduced to its lowest common denominator. Um, Uninformed arrogance is a bad mix, right? That's kind of what the video from Friday was about. It's like you don't know about what you're talking about, but you're talking about it like you do. And that, I mean, how is that not our culture right now? Literally everybody is screaming with complete confidence about shit they have no idea about, right? That's dangerous. That's extremely dangerous. Um, but just the ways in which technology kind of, it's just like sneaky, it's sneaky duplicitous. Um, that malicious idiocy that the video talks about, like technology feeds that, right? Because again, it makes us think we know things that we don't. Um, and technology, I can't read. Technology emboldens ignorance, right? You can go on Twitter and you can be like, yeah, I know all about this, and you can scream about it, even though you don't know anything about it, but you feel emboldened because I can know these things, and I can read this article, and I can do this in a second. And technology, the way it mixes into all of this, is pretty duplicitous when you think about it. And that goes back to the whole Burnham, welcome to the internet. I mean, go back and listen to that song and tell me it doesn't sort of address a lot of these things. Brondo equals Google or Amazon, probably more Amazon than that. I mean, and again, drawing the parallels to now, Trump was doing Goya commercials out of the White House. It's like, how is it? I mean, how are we not currently living in an idiocracy? Like, White House presented by Goya, if you remember that whole thing, right? Um, I guess that's all I got. Nothing will change until the biggest shithead gets on board, basically. So yeah, thanks for your comments. Gave me some things to think about. I appreciate that. Hopefully you guys finish up this week strong. Papers due Friday. You should have got an email with the topics. And have a good Monday.